Hello, everyone. Welcome. Hope all of you are doing well. Today, our topic is the influential mind. And today we have joining with us all the way from London is Sister Maureen. Most of you know her, sweet, humble, always smiling. She has been following Raj Yoga meditation and also practicing since more than 40 years now. She's the program director of Brahmakumari's UK, and she's also the representative of Brahmakumari's UK to the United Nations in Vienna. As usual, Sister Maureen will be answering questions at the end of this session and will also be leading us to a very wonderful meditation. So do drop your questions at the chat box, and I shall now welcome Sister Maureen. Om Shanti, Sister.
Thank you. Om Shanti to you, Jabin, and thank you for the kind introduction. And it's very lovely to be with everyone. And these days we're all traveling without any air tickets. And so it's nice to be able to reach Jakarta and all my friends there. Because whether I've met you or not, I would consider you to be my friends. So today the theme is the influential mind, which is a very interesting topic because I think we all do agree that the mind is very influential, and the mind is with us all the time. Are we ever separated from our mind? So something that we're never separated from really will have an influence on it. And so on us. And so I suppose the question is, do I influence my mind more, or does my mind influence me more? So we will be exploring that. And really, when you think about how the mind works and what the mind is there for, you can see that it's really our mind that connects us with the world. Because if you see something, what happens? You begin to think about it. Or you see someone, you begin to think about them. Or maybe the mind associates to different people, mutual connections. Before you know it, the mind can be off anywhere in the world, or can be in any time and space, can be 10 years back, can be 10 years forward. So the mind is very flexible, a lot of ability to travel beyond space and time. But what we see, we tend to think about. What we hear, we tend to think about. And so through the senses, certain thoughts are evoked in the mind. And according to those thoughts, so it is that we begin to experience our world. So our
Sorry, sister, to cut you. Do you mind keeping the mic a little bit closer so that it's audible?
Oh, yes. Is that better? Let me put it up a little. How is that sound-wise? Is that better?
That's much better. Thank you.
Much better. Okay. Do I need to repeat anything, or?
No, that's all right.
That's all right. Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. Um, and so the mind is that bridge between the self and the world, and really is uh, the mind is that through which we experience. Because if you think about what happens when you think certain things, it evokes certain feelings, it evokes certain memories. And so then you begin to relive those as if they were happening quite currently. So the mind plays a very interesting part. Um, the mind, we also find, does fluctuate quite a lot. And in responding to situations, the mind tends to be a slave to the situations, in the sense that, imagine the scenario. And of course, if the mind is a slave to a situation, then it means my whole self becomes a slave to that situation. And I'll give you an example, which you would also know. If somebody praises me, then what kind of thoughts are evoked in my mind, and how do I feel? I think everyone likes a bit of praise, a bit of encouragement, and you begin to feel good. Yes, okay, maybe I am okay. Maybe I'm doing a good thing. And you begin to feel good about yourself. Then, if in 5 minutes' time, somebody then insults you, then what does your mind do? Does it stay happy? Does it stay stable? And what kind of feelings are evoked? Well, they don't really like me. I knew I wasn't any good anyway. We all know the kind of thoughts that can arise. And so the mind often fluctuates a lot according to the external circumstances. And in particular, of course, I think we are seeing a lot of this happening. There is quite a lot of fear around at the moment, that's for sure. But also accompanying that, I'm seeing an increasing level of anger towards governments, towards systems, whatever it is. And then we're seeing a lot of anger connected with community and culture and everything. Anger because people feel they're not being treated fairly. And this whole energy of anger is a very volatile energy, but it also takes the self out of control. So when I have many angry thoughts, I don't want those thoughts to build up inside of me to the extent that I begin to speak angrily or even act angrily. Now, I'm not suggesting anybody here listening will become violent. I'm sure you're not that kind of audience. But you can see what can happen when anger reaches an extreme. Then there's violence. And I always remind people, often people are scared of others who are very angry. And I always remind people, if somebody's angry, then they're not strong, they're actually weak. And because they can be manipulated at any second, you can make them angry, or hopefully you can calm them down. And somebody once showed me a saying which I liked very much. When you get angry, the only thing that you're doing is telling the world you're a fool. Imagine that. I've allowed something to upset my mind so much that those feelings of anger are then evoked. So the mind does a lot. A mind is very, very connected with our emotions and invokes certain feelings. So it is very important to take care of our mind and to think about how I can use my mind in the best possible way? The mind is energy. Thoughts are a form of energy. And think about worrisome thoughts. When you worry a lot, how's your energy? Daddy Janki, who was until recently the head of our organization, the Brahma Kumaris, she passed on just in March. So it's just 3 months ago. And she was aged 104, a very dynamic woman, very incredible, serving till the last days. But she would talk about the connection between our thoughts and our breath and our energy. And say, think about it. If you have many thoughts, you're worrying, you're tense, thoughts are moving rapidly. What happens to your breath? You breathe in a more shallow way. And then what happens to your energy? You tend to have less energy. And the other way, if I have good thoughts, happy thoughts, I'm calm. My breathing is calm. And I have more energy to achieve whatever it is I wish to. And I would watch Daddy Janki sometimes, and I would be amazed at how much she would achieve in one day, whether she was meeting people, sharing classes, going to visit people, whatever she had to do, reading her emails, whatever she had to do, she would do. But she accomplished a lot in 24 hours, and she slept little. But the reason? She didn't waste the valuable energy of her mind. She always used it in a fruitful way, in a powerful way. The mind also makes assumptions. And I've been watching this in myself over the last couple of weeks. Somebody said something about what somebody said in an email, and I took on board their assumption, and in my mind I agreed with it. And then when I actually asked the person, I discovered that my assumption was totally wrong. And I've been reminding myself the last little while, don't make assumptions you don't know. You need to find out. If it's important enough, find out. If not, let it go. But of course, the mind making assumptions very much affects our relationships. And so the mind is in between there too. And in particular, if you begin to have negative thoughts about someone, even if you don't say anything, thoughts are never hidden. Thoughts create feelings which create vibrations, or rather thoughts evoke feelings which create vibrations. And a person's vibrations can't remain hidden for too long. So we may think that, well, I'm being critical of the person, but they don't know. They will know. They pick it up. We pick it up from others. And that the way we think about someone is actually becomes our attitude towards them. And we often have the saying that the attitude creates an atmosphere. And so the atmosphere around me becomes a negative one, a critical one. And then people are much less likely to want to be in my atmosphere, in my vicinity, because they're not going to get a good experience. Sometimes people wonder why others don't like them or don't respect them. Very often it's this: what are the vibrations I'm putting out from my thinking? And so you can see that the mind is very, very influential. And the first thing that it influences is me. And so this is the thing, being a slave to my mind. But I remember we ran from, well, it's still running actually, a positive thinking course, which was called Make Your Mind Your Best Friend. And I always loved that title because this is exactly what we need to do. Because if I allow my mind to take over, then the mind can actually submerge truth. It can prevent me from listening to my conscience. It can prevent me from listening to my deep inner feelings that can guide me in the right way. And so that's very dangerous, actually. And that's where I get into that very, very reactive mode. And then, of course, what happens when you react, or you get angry or irritated, you end up regretting it. You end up having to apologize. And so you waste so much time and energy. And yet, if I didn't get into that kind of thinking at all, then I wouldn't have to spend time repairing my relationships. And that's something a lot of us spend time doing, a lot, repairing relationships. So we always say, don't we, prevention is better than cure. So somehow I need to guide my mind so that I don't get into all of that negativity. And at the moment, generally around the world, especially because of course, the COVID situation, but then the economic situation as a consequence of lockdown, there is a lot of fear around. And where there's fear, it's very difficult to have love. And fear doesn't allow me to see things objectively. So where there's a wave in a community, I have to be careful that my mind does not succumb to that wave, but I can actually see more clearly what it is that I have to do. Otherwise, fear will prevent me from doing that. I think it's very important what the mind does. If I allow my mind just to do whatever it wants to do, react in certain ways, respond, you usually find that the mind needs feeding in some way. It needs something from the external to feed it, to keep it calm or to keep it positive. Just like earlier on, I mentioned about praise or insult. So one thing is feeding my mind some negativity and the mind becomes negative. Another is feeding my mind something positive, so it becomes positive. But then we know that that can change at any time. It's not going to be constant. And the problem is that in that situation, I'm in a mode of taking from life. I need something. I need someone's love. I need someone's respect. I need someone's approval. So I'm taking. And that leaves me very vulnerable because when someone's giving, it's fine. But when someone stops giving, well, that's another scenario, isn't it? So I have to shift from this taking to giving. And for that, I need a lot of positive resources inside to influence my mind into that giving mode. Now, another thing is that, people often use the power of the mind in different ways. And some people say, well, if you concentrate your mind, you can get anything you want. And to a certain extent, it's true. Um, think about an athlete who's very, very focused on his or her goal. That single mindedness, that one focus, that intense concentration can lead them to be successful, to achieve. And that is important in life. We all embark on different endeavors, whether it's at work, whether it's a pastime, whether it's to do with our relationships. And you can see as well, there have been, as well as talking about the fear that seems to reign at the moment, it's not only fear. I'm sure all of you get lots of emails and especially WhatsApp messages. And I've been getting quite a few messages of where people have really shown a huge amount of kindness at this time, where people have been, who may have wealth and status, have decided to use it for feeding the poor. And I find that very touching. So they've used their mind to focus, to concentrate on something good, and they've achieved it. And it's benefited so many people. It's helped to give people back their dignity. And that's very precious. So, yes, on the one hand, focusing my mind on a goal, excuse me, and achieving that is a very powerful thing to do. On the other hand, sometimes people focus their mind on what they want, focus their mind on achieving their desires. I want a new car, I want a new house, I want to earn lots of money, whatever it is. But this is the focus of desire in a materialistic sense. And you may remember there was a whole wave a few years ago of The Secret, use your mind to get what you want. And people achieved, but then often later on, people lost things, what they'd achieved. It was very precarious. I found out many things later. And that taught me a principle that if I'm using my mind to take something for myself only, to gain something or achieve something that's just for myself, or perhaps for a very small or limited number of people, then it's not going to be long lasting. And ultimately, it won't bring me satisfaction or inner peace. But if I'm using my mind and focusing it on a good task, on achieving something that really is for the benefit of all, or the benefit of as many human beings as I can reach, then that's something that's going to bring me many blessings. That's something that's going to strengthen me inside. That's something that is going to bring a more permanent happiness to me. A, because I've done something good, which is good in itself. I've followed my conscience. But secondly, very much the blessings from everyone. And we can also say God's blessings too. We had a lovely teaching a few days ago, and part of that teaching it said, God is higher than all human beings because God is for all human beings. And that touched me very much. Human beings are for certain sections of the community. Human beings are for certain, family or workplace or whatever. But to be for all human beings, I thought, well, this is something we all need to aspire to, especially at this time. And so, yes, I can concentrate my thought, but with what intention am I concentrating my thoughts? And so, okay, what can I do with my mind? How can I really help my mind? So, okay, and in that, I'm helping myself now. I'm separating self and mind very consciously, because the self is the being within, the inner being. And the mind is like an organ of that being, if a sort of something that the mind, something that the being uses, and as we said earlier, to interact with the world especially. So the self is this being, spirit, energy, soul. People have different names for that conscious energy that is the self. And one thing that we understand about that conscious energy is that its original nature is peace. Now, understanding that my original nature is peace, helps me to see the direction in which I can guide my mind. Because the mind now has to come under my, if you like, control, or I would say under my sovereignty. The mind is part of my inner kingdom, and I need to know what the mind is doing. And the mind has to do my bidding, not the bidding of everyone else out there. Otherwise, the mind feeds me untruth. So it's very important that I begin this journey. And the mind, used in the right way, can absolutely connect us to our inner selves. And our basis of meditation is through the use of the mind. We don't say blank the mind. Have you ever tried to blank your mind? Is it possible? Very difficult. And even then, it's as if you're using a powerful thought to suppress other thoughts. And that's not healthy. And that will create a buildup of tension inside. So let me use the energy of thought, because it's the task of the mind to think. It will always think, but it's how I use it that's so, so important. And so our basic meditation is really thinking thoughts of our original self. Now, we can try it later when we do our meditation together. But just the thought, I am a being of peace. You see how it can change the atmosphere? Or the thought, I am a being of love. I am a being of wisdom. Very simple thoughts. But now these are thoughts that give me strength and power and connect me with my original self. And these are the thoughts that calm the mind down and enable me to become again the sovereign over my mind. And of course, the consequences of that kind of thinking are very powerful. What kind of feelings am I creating inside? What kind of feelings do I then have about myself? What kind of feelings do I then have about others? If these are my thoughts within. Such a contrast, actually. When I'm thinking about my original state of peace, of love, of wisdom, that's when I can begin to feel good inside. When I'm thinking about others, why did so-and-so do this? They shouldn't have done that. We all know those thoughts, and they can nag at us for days and days, if not months, if not years. And so what is the result of that? Very different. The mind is disturbed, the emotions are disturbed, and I get into that mode of control. I've found that myself. I've understood that when I think a lot about somebody and what they're doing or not doing, I really want to control them. I want them to be as I want them to be. I don't want them to be showing this negative behavior. I don't like it. I'm judging them. That's wrong. I'm right. So what happens? Can you change anyone by telling them what they need to do? No. We need to be an example. We need to live that first in our lives. Then we can encourage others. I know you would know the famous saying from Gandhi, be the change you want to see in the world. And there's a lovely story where a mother brought her son to Gandhi. He was 6 or 7 years old. And she told Gandhiji, please, can you ask him not to eat any more sweets? It's really bad for him. And he doesn't listen to me. He just wants to eat sweets. And he won't eat his meal. And Gandhi said to the mother, okay, bring him back in 2 weeks' time. Okay. 2 weeks later, she brought the boy back. And she again said, Gandhiji, please tell him not to eat sweets. And Gandhi looked at him and he said, son, please don't eat any more sweets. They're not good for you. So the woman was puzzled. She asked Gandhi, well, why didn't you say that 2 weeks ago? You could have said it 2 weeks ago rather than waiting. And Gandhiji said, well, 2 weeks ago, I was eating sweets. So I had to give up eating sweets first. Then I could say to the boy, that's very honest. That's a lot of honesty. And of course, then, if I'm an example of something, I'm doing it in my life and I say it, it has power. If I'm not doing it and I say it, well, it's like preaching and nobody's going to believe me or follow that. Or if they do, they'll feel suppressed. So I'm beginning to see, right? We're beginning to see how we can bring the mind more into alignment with our original self so that the mind can really serve me and serve that purpose of coming back to my original state of peace, of love, of wisdom, of joy that doesn't depend on the external, that is independent because it's part of the being itself, myself. And then, of course, when you're more in touch with that true self and you're actually allowing that true self to motivate your words and behavior, then the mind has to go along with what you wish. And your whole interaction with the world changes. It becomes very different. It's a much more positive interaction. So beginning to get the picture, it's important to make my mind influential by influencing it by the highest qualities. And of course, the mind can also take us to God, can take us to the Supreme. I think this is very important. We need a lot of strength in today's world. And where does real strength come from? Where does real mercy come from? Where does real healing come from? It comes from the Divine One, the one up above. So I need to absorb that divine energy. There's a term for it that we use in our teachings, Sakash, which is hard to translate, but it's the energy from the divine, the light and might from the divine. And in today's world, generally, of course, always generalizing, people don't have a thought to take that energy from God. So they're trying to solve problems just at a horizontal level. And I think it was Einstein who said that you cannot solve a problem with the same thinking that actually created the problem. So without taking that divine energy, it's going to be hard for me to maintain that connection with my original self, and going to be harder for me to maintain that connection with God so that I can absorb the light and might that I need to in my life. This energy coming into the world will have a very, very profound impact. But first of all, it will have a very profound impact on my life. So what should I do? I need to practice. I can't just suddenly say, oh, the divine energy is going to come, I'm going to be fine. I need to understand and I need to practice. And I need to take time for this. And it needs to be a daily practice. Spirituality, which is what this is about really, is about life. I remember one person saying, spirituality is about how you tie your shoelaces in the morning. Now, I know today not everyone has shoelaces, but you get the idea. It has to come into every little act that I do. It's not something for just when I pray or I meditate or I'm in a mosque or a temple or a church. It has to be in my life. And so that's why every morning we make time. It is important to make time to be reflective and to be with the self. How well do I know myself? How well do I know my potential as a human being? If I don't give myself time to reflect and be with myself, I will never know, and I will continue to put limitations on myself. So it's time for us to become free from that, because those limitations create barriers that create conflict. So we need to step out of that way of thinking. And so I need that practice first thing in the morning before I start my day. I'm a soul. I'm a being of peace. I take that energy and strength from the divine to empower my being, to empower my mind, so that I can do that which is right. I can follow that which is true throughout my day. Now, of course, we're not going to become perfect straight away. It is very much a journey. And I always like this phrase, we're all a work in progress. So I'm on that journey. So there'll be ups and downs as there is on any journey. But because I now understand the aim and the destination of that journey, it helps me to keep going. So every morning, to make time for the self is really important. And I'm sure many of you pray, and that is so important. Maybe many of you meditate, that is so important. And it's important to just spend a little time quietly connecting with the self and remembering the one who can give us strength. So we invoke that divine presence into our lives, and we invoke that energy, that light and might from God, and it comes to us. And in the evening, important again to set aside time to look through the day, not to look back and say what went wrong and what went right, because either you'll be positive or negative internally, but to look back through the day and to say, what did I learn today? And I love to do that, and I learn many things because we all make mistakes and we all have to learn. So I take these as opportunities. And then throughout the day, do I take time to top up? We often take time once an hour just to stop and remember, just for a minute. Very powerful. But you can do this anytime. You know, there are lots of times when we're not necessarily using our mind productively, where the mind is off all over the place because the task I'm doing doesn't demand full concentration. So, for example, I'm brushing my teeth. Where does my mind go? I'm going up an escalator in a department store. Where does my mind go? I'm walking along. Often the mind has gone here and there. Can I use that time to focus on my original state of being, to remind myself? When you see how much we use the mind in a useless way, we see how much time we have to use it in a useful way. And when somebody says to me, oh, I don't have time to meditate, then I say to them, do you have time to worry? Everybody has time to worry. So then you have time to meditate as well. And another thing that I find practically very, very helpful, when something happens, before I react or I respond, I would like to give a pause. Somebody says something, instead of just jumping in, pause. Then you're going to respond rather than react. The telephone goes, pause, then pick it up. It makes the world of difference. That little pause, even for a few seconds. And there are very few emergencies that can't wait for a few seconds, especially in relationships. If I answer back too quickly or I answer that email too quickly, I've given the wrong feelings. And then there's an even bigger reaction. Don't rush. Be patient. Do things cautiously. Well, not too cautiously. We also want to be spontaneous and alive, of course. Following our inner goodness, letting it emerge, letting that joy emerge from within. But when there's a challenge, often that pause is just very, very helpful. So it's a whole new way of being and living. relying more on the internal than the external to guide me. Of course, there are many times I need to take advice and understand and move with that, and to move with cooperation and collaboration, without a doubt. But there are many times when I just rush into something and, well, we all know the consequences. So this is about living life from the inside out rather than the outside in. And something I was talking about with a group earlier this morning, that, there is no problem for which the soul, the being itself, doesn't have a solution. Yes, I may not know the physical solutions to things, technical things I need to find out, that's fine. But in terms of behavior, in terms of responding, I have the solutions within. If I listen and if I connect with the self and with that divine energy, the solutions will come to me. And it's interesting that as you do this more and more, you learn to trust it. And the more you learn to trust it, the more you become light inside, easy, free in yourself and in your mind. And the more you feel as if burdens are lifting, you don't feel that heaviness any longer. And so becoming the sovereign of my mind, making my mind truly influential in the spiritual sense, or in the sense of influential in terms of goodness, in terms of truth, then that is what I would call an influential mind. Not a mind that just tries to control others and suppress them. That's not influence, that is just suppression, and it will bring resistance. And we see that everywhere in the world, and we see it in life. But a mind that is based on truth, working on the basis of truth and our inner goodness and the inspiration from the divine, well, then that truly is an influential mind. So let us move in that direction. Thank you very much. Now there may be some questions or comments. Oh.
Thank you so much, sister. You have given us indeed so many points to think and ponder upon. I would just like to highlight some points. What you said that really touched me is that the mind can submerge the truth, and the mind can feed us untruth. This is what we really need to work upon. And also we need to guard our mind. And also one point that how you said that touched you was really beautiful is that God is for all human beings. It is indeed very, very beautiful, because sometimes we always think, why not me, God? So this is a very nice point that God is for all human beings. And lastly, I would like to highlight the point that you said that pause makes a world of a difference, because we are always rushing and in a hurry to do whatever we want to do, that we always tend to forget to pause for a second. So thank you very much. Yes, we have a few questions here that I will read them out to you. Thank you so much for sharing such a very meaningful information. I have a question that how can we transfer our mind from circumstantial state to substantial state?
So just to make sure I understand the question, so circumstantial state Do you mean connected with the circumstances? And substantial state, you mean more connected with truth? Is that what the meaning
Yes.
is of the question? Yes.
Yes, that's the question.
Okay, okay. It's a question of practice, but it's also a question of and being vigilant. And when you are beginning to practice that inner experience of being peace, love, wisdom, and that is getting stronger, you then begin to see the contrast more and more clearly between truth and falsehood, if you like. And so whereas things before you felt were, quite okay according to the circumstances, you now say to yourself, no, that's not okay. That's actually going to weaken me if I continue to think like this. This is actually going to create harm or create disharmony. And so at first we don't see it. We just think that what we're thinking is right. And especially when we're criticizing someone, I remember asking someone, I say, well, maybe you can, why you don't need to see their defects, maybe see what's good in them. And they said to me, no, but I'm just seeing what's real. Sure, it's real, it's there, but what do I want to focus on? So we begin to see the contrast between truth, reality, and what is superficial reality, if you like, or unreality. Because when a person is behaving in a negative way and they're creating whatever circumstances there are, that isn't actually the truth of who they are. They are under an influence. They have their truth submerged at that point. So am I going to relate to that superficial self of them, or am I going to relate to something deeper? And of course, you will know in your own experience, and, a lot of studies are documented on this, that, for example, when somebody has behaved badly, perhaps is in prison, and we've been involved in a lot of prison work in the Brahma Kumaris, different parts of the world. When you begin to relate to somebody really as a human being, but even more so as a being with inherent goodness, it's incredible to see how the person responds and how their real truth begins to emerge and how they begin to transform. You don't have to say anything, but it's simply the way in which you relate to them in a very different way. Everyone sees them as a bad person. You begin to see their inequality, so you're giving them a chance. And so this would be one example of moving from circumstantial to substantial. You're seeing something deeper, something that's more permanent and everlasting, even eternal. So I think this would be the kind of thing.
Thank you, sister. The next question is the mind subjective, objective, or something else?
Sometimes it seems like it's something else. It seems like it's off on another planet somewhere. Actually, it depends how you use your mind as to whether it's subjective or objective. So if I'm not in touch with my real self, then what happens is that I construct a self that I wish the world to see. So if I don't know my inner truth as a being of peace, a being of love, being of wisdom, then how do I relate to the world? We all relate to the world through our egos. And so we rely on different identities, maybe profession, maybe role, maybe looks, so many things that make up our identity. Sorry, can you just tell me the question again? I just lost the question. Can you just repeat the question?
Yeah, is the mind subjective, objective, or something else?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you. I just didn't connect it for a moment. And so when I'm relating more on the in terms of the ego or the persona that I'm sharing with the world, then the mind becomes very subjective because it only looks for things that will serve to bolster or enhance that persona, because this is what I am to me. This is the identity I've assumed. So then it becomes subjective. It looks for the approval. It looks for the praise. It looks to be biased towards someone who's going to support me rather than somebody who may be telling me a greater truth about myself, but I don't find it supportive. I can't face it. I resist it. So then it becomes subjective, definitely. But, and that means subject to many, many influences. But when I am connecting more with my real self, the mind becomes more and more objective and is able to see truth. And sometimes this takes the form of, somebody will say something to you, and it may sound very negative or even accusing or attacking, but you recognize the deeper need within that person, the deeper need in their soul. And so you want to address that, and you want to uplift the person. So the mind in that situation has become objective. It's seen the reality. Or sometimes you're faced with opposing viewpoints, opposing theories, or whatever it is, opposing opinions. And then you can be swayed towards this or towards that. But with wisdom, there's often a perspective that's objective, that takes everything out of the polarity. And I often quote this story where somebody asked, a couple came to Daddy Janki, who I mentioned earlier, and they said, Daddy, we're not getting on. Should we get a divorce? Now, it's not really fair to ask an external person, should we divorce? But anyway, they asked the question. And Daddy's answer, Daddy said, yes, you must definitely get a divorce. But what you should divorce is anger and ego and criticism and negativity. So I thought that was a brilliant answer. She was actually getting to the root of the problem. She wasn't taking sides, getting to the root of the problem and giving them a solution. So this is objectivity, when the mind is working on the basis of truth.
Thank you, sister. The next question is, what does the world need more, wisdom or intelligence?
I definitely go for wisdom. Intelligence, okay, it can be useful, but it can also lead us into many traps. I'm not saying it's not good to be intelligent, because I need a certain amount of intelligence to make sense of the world, but it's not the only thing I need to rely on. And I know many people who you would not put in an intelligent bracket in terms of academia or profession or anything, but they have a lot of wisdom. They may seem like very simple people, but they give you a lot of wisdom as to how to live. And that's much more important. In today's world, just think, say, about the environmental crisis. Now, there's a lot of intelligent people looking at that. And we have many facts and figures and predictions, and it's all very dire. And yet we know the solution lies with people and their lifestyle and their way of being and their interactions with nature. But yet people are not changing. So all the intelligence in that particular scenario is not going to make the change. It's going to highlight the scenario, but the change has to come through wisdom. The change has to come in the hearts of human beings, to change their mindset and to change the way of living to a more simple lifestyle that doesn't take so much from the environment. And it's difficult. At least now people know this is what needs to happen. Before then, people didn't acknowledge that. Now more and more people are acknowledging it. But to make the change needs wisdom. And so actually, it's wisdom that the world needs.
Thank you, sister. We have two more questions. Is that okay with you? You have
Yeah,
time?
sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fine.
How can I manage the mind when things are not going according to me in the right perspective?
Okay, we come up against that every day, don't we? You know, we come up against things that we feel are not right, people doing the wrong things, taking wrong decisions in our view. And maybe, yes, subjectively, it is that way because we can see how much people are suffering on every level: relationships, poverty, disease, so many things. And that tells you that a lot of poor and wrong decisions have been made that has brought sections of humanity to that level of suffering. And so, again, I've done the same thing. Just remind me of the question again. Gone on the track. Just repeat the question.
How can I manage my mind when things are not going according to me in the right perspective?
Yeah, okay. So at that moment, instead of allowing my mind to just think about all the things that are wrong, I have to take a step back and say, okay, can I disengage even for a few moments? And I've been practicing this. You know, we were talking earlier about what we hear, we think about, what we see, we think about. Can I step back and disengage my thoughts? And I'm detaching, not in a harsh way to say that I'm cold or I don't care. It's not about that. But I'm stepping back and disengaging to see a different perspective and to ask the question of the self, allowing the mind to ask the question, not what is wrong and why is it wrong, because very hard to get answers, or if you do, it's very complicated. But to say, now, what can I do to contribute to making this situation better? And that's a very different question. And sometimes it's, how can I be in myself to make this situation better? And as soon as I start asking those kind of questions, I'm managing my mind away from just all the occupation with what's going wrong towards possible solutions. So I do need to step back and allow my mind to ask the right questions of the self. And often in asking the questions, the answers come automatically.
Last question, sister. Can we change the people that are surrounding us through the practice of meditation?
Well, if I practice meditation with the aim of changing them, it will never work. And it's actually a misuse of my meditation and a misuse of my mind. If I meditate because truly I want to elevate myself, my own mind, my own thinking, my own spiritual consciousness, I want to connect with God, I want my own self-transformation, then if I'm meditating with that motivation, then my meditation will be powerful. And then I don't need to think about changing other people. Because I have changed, they will automatically begin to change. But the minute I want them to change, it doesn't work. So this is very subtle. Forget about what you want other people to be like. They have their own part. They're their own individual human beings. But yes, what can I do? How can I transform myself And very often through that, others seeing that example or feeling that vibration, they naturally begin to change, or they ask you, what are you doing? I want some of the happiness that you have. So first the self, and then other things will happen.
Thank you so much, sister. That was indeed wonderful. If you could
Thank you.
now guide us through a meditation on how do we control our mind. So a meditation that we could use on a daily basis to remind ourselves that we are the self-sovereign that over our mind.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So please sit comfortably, feet on the floor. Take a couple of deep breaths and prepare for our inner journey. So first, I have to go within and disengage my mind from all my surroundings and the things that I see and hear around me. I see, but I don't think about it. I hear, but I remain inside. I go within and I ask myself the question, who am I? I focus my mind on this question, who am I? And I begin to experience the peace of my inner being, the peace of the soul itself. This peace is my original nature. It needs nothing external to support it. It is part of me. I am a being of peace. The self is energy, light, and the focus for that energy is in the center of my forehead. I focus on the tiny being of light that is the self. I visualize that light in the center of my forehead. And I allow all my awareness to focus there. I become that light. I'm light. I'm free. I am a being of peace. And now with a thought, a divine thought, a pure thought, I connect with the divine being, the divine light, the one who is for all human beings, but also for me. As I connect, I feel the flow of energy from the divine to I, the being, the soul. That energy rejuvenates me, heals me, gives me strength. My original qualities of peace, of love, of wisdom, of truth are strengthened, and they begin to guide my life. I live from the inside out, bringing peace and love and wisdom into everything that I do. Thank you. Om Shanti.
Thank you very much, sister. That was amazing. So, this is what we need to work upon now, living from inside out. So,
Absolutely.
I'm sure all of us will start working on that now. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We will be having another session on coming Saturday, the 4th of July. So do drop me a message and I can forward you the details. Thank you once again, Sister Maureen, for your time and for sharing with us.
Thank you, Jabin. Thank you so much for arranging this, and thanks to everyone who took part. Thank you.
Thank you. Om Shanti.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.